Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I've read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is the author of the book Death Panels, no other than Mr. Greg Vigdor. Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Greg, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yes, Daniel, thanks for having me on. I am a retired healthcare executive who spent 40 years of my career trying to make American healthcare system work better. Then I retired in 2019 and tried to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And one of the things I had to realize was that for all my hard work and others trying to make American healthcare better, that it still was a huge problem. And so what I connected that to was a childhood passion of wanting to write the great American novel. And I decided that in my first retirement year, which was also the COVID time, that I would try to write my American novel, but I would do it about healthcare, including a lot of my thoughts about what was wrong with American healthcare and how we could make it better. When I did that, I thought it would be just sort of a bucket list item for me that I would do it. I'd get one copy printed and I'd say, well, I did that. Now what do I do next? When I sent it off to some of my friends, they thought it was a really pretty good book. And so it was called The Theory of Irv, and I went out and self-published it, and it was pretty successful for a first-time author with high reviews, and sold about 2,500 copies of it. So I decided to try a second career as an author. And so I've turned that book into a series. Death Panels is the third in the series. I'm now halfway through the fourth. And what I'm trying to do uniquely in my genre is I write these entertaining, fictitious medical thrillers, but they are imbued with real American health policy questions and answers for how to make it better. And so my hope is that people will be entertained, but they will also learn about how we can make the system work better for the people, not only America, but across the world.
Certainly, Mr. Greg Vigdor. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world, and we are hoping for more and more empowering books like this to come. So, what inspired you to create this series?
It was my frustration with having worked so hard to make the system better and still having it be largely the unproductive system that most Americans know it to be. And I thought I had unique things to share about that for my 40 years of work trying to make it better. But I also thought that maybe I had a different idea for how to present it. I gave so many professional speeches and wrote so many professional papers saying this is how we should fix it. I said, what if there's a whole different angle to this where it's more about entertainment and using that to educate Americans about the system and ways to improve it rather than what I had spent most of my career doing. And so far, I've been pretty optimistic based upon the reaction I've had to my books.
So, Mr. Greg, what makes health policy an interesting backdrop for a detective series?
That there's so many mysteries about healthcare, from the diseases themselves to how they get treated to the motivations of the people engaged in the system, good and bad. And so it's particularly great for having heroes and villains both be profiled and to take entertaining and different stories through the plot lines to really show what can happen and how we can navigate through um, the experiences that we all have at some point in dealing with American healthcare and start to imagine the even greater consequences if you start to up the stakes, which is what authors do, is make regular situations much more extreme in all forms. And so it's really just the ideal setting. And I found ways to, every time I do a new book, to grow the threats, to grow my villains, to grow my heroes, and to find even more important things to say about how we can make the system better.
Certainly. So, what sets Death Panels apart from the earlier books in the series?
So my first book in the series, The Theory of Irv, was really, a lot of it was historical fiction, trying to examine why it is American healthcare developed the way it was and what solutions might be to it. My second book is called The COVID Murders, and that was a little bit of me being able to talk about the COVID experience, or at least that period of time when there was this thing called COVID that affected the planet. Death Panels is a different take on what I was writing, in that I tried to find a big policy issue and tried to address it more in a compartmentalized form. Death Panels explores the question of life-saving treatment, these amazing medical discoveries that we've had that really are the reasons for American and worldwide healthcare being what it is, that we can do this miraculous things that 100 years ago we would die for, that are now available. Many of them at great expense. They might be drugs, they might be procedures. But the question is, who gets these? And so Death Panels explores the question of how do we distribute these life-saving technologies in a fair way? And what happens when both good and evil try to play in that world?
So, Mr. Greg, do you see Irv as more of a detective or a health policy advocate, or both?
Both. Irv is a unique guy. He's really tried to find and carve his own way through his career as a healthcare person, mostly infused with this by the fact that his mother died of breast cancer when he was a child. And so he just wants to do the right thing. And so he just looks for opportunities to try to do good. He's the consummate hero. And he runs into these situations, and he has such an experience and a body of knowledge about healthcare works and doesn't work, that he is able to go where others can't.
So, Mr. Greg, let's talk about the plot and themes in Death Panels. What is the central mystery in Death Panels, and how does it relate to a real world healthcare issues?
So the central plot line, although there's a few that intersect, the central one is a woman named Nancy Jones who wakes up in a strange medical facility coming out of a coma from a case of long COVID. And she's been in other healthcare facilities over the past few years, but this is unlike any other place she's been in, starting with her discovery that she is locked in. And she's about the only person that can actually even move around. There's hundreds of other patients, and she's trying to figure out why they're there, why they can't get out, and what are they doing in this strange facility. That's kind of the central question. Irv gets involved in this because he is looking for a way to recover from a near-death experience from his last investigation. And he thinks he's found a soft landing job in Las Vegas to help work on a healthy communities project. Well, it turns out that's not what it is. It's something that imbues episodes with the Russian mob and people who are trying to make money out of healthcare, including at the facility where his friend Nancy Jones finds herself. So the two come together in a series of circumstances, and they have to figure out how to get out and how to stop the evil that's going on in that facility that is really trying to figure out how it is we decide who lives and who dies and who makes money from that.
So, what inspired the concept of Death Panels, and how does the book explore or challenge the idea?
So the really origins of it, when I was a young man first getting involved in my healthcare career, was an author by the name of Victor Fuchs, who wrote a book, a health policy book called Who Shall Live? And it's one of the central health policy books of the ages, really exploring how it is we approach this social question of determining who gets services that will save people's lives. This was my attempt to try to do honor to him and his work, and sort of an updated version of it, given some of the modern craziness of healthcare, the internet, the new ways of accessing technology, and just trying to give an example of how this could reach into a new dimension that's more for the current times than what he wrote about. But the essence of it, it remains the same. What is the fairest way in society to figure out who gets these things that can save our lives and who doesn't?
So, Mr. Greg, how do the character in Death Panels reflect broader issues in the American healthcare system?
Well, I try to approach it from a lot of what's been going on over the past few years in terms of the changes in the system, which is a lot of aggregation of hospitals merging with other hospitals, insurers taking over hospitals, physician groups being bought up. And it's more and more becoming like the airlines, where there's just a few hospitals and health systems and not the many community-based systems that we had for most of our history. So I really try to explain that using the plot line that I have around this facility. because this is a big system that is taken over and they're the ones doing the evil. So it's really trying to explore the contemporary changes in health policy with this setting and how it is we want to try to work through these. It's a real issue to try to figure out how we deal with this aggregation of control and power and money. And I don't think I solved that problem. It's one that really needs to be teed up for later books in my series, and that's exactly what I'm doing. But it's really what I think one of the questions of our time is who controls healthcare? Not even necessarily who makes money, but who controls it and for what reasons.
Yes, that's the big question mark, people. Who control it? Let's talk about the writing process and research. What kind of research do you do to accurately portray health policy in a fictional format?
So, health policy is what I know. I'm an expert in it. So, that was the easy part for me. And it was much more a matter of how to communicate it. So, it's not jargony, it's not too complicated. It's something that people will be attracted to, not turned off in writing an entertaining and page turning medical thriller. So my focus has really been much more about how to learn to write the novels. So how do you develop characters? How do you write dialogue? How do you get a plot line that ties together and stretches the reader's ability to have some suspense about what might happen, but also doesn't lose them? That's been the harder thing for me to learn, and I've been really proud of the great ratings I've had on all three of my books. Every one seems to get better, and all have been over 4-star ratings. Death Panels itself so far has a 5-star rating on Amazon. And so I think I'm starting to learn more and more how to communicate and do the craft of writing while I'm able to take what I know so well, which is health policy, and sort of insert it into my book.
Certainly. Writing more make you perfect. Mr. Greg, so did you face any challenges in blending detective fiction with health policy?
The first take was pretty hard, partly because the book got long, because I was doing two things at once, trying to explain how American healthcare got the way it did. But with apologies for that, I decided that's what I needed to do. That was the start of the series. The subsequent books have become shorter, intentionally so. And so I'm finding that's probably a better sweet spot for more the consumption side of this, of readers who want to buy books, and also doing audiobooks and other platforms like that. So I think I'm starting to understand more and more not only how to write a book, but how to position a book and market it in the world that we live in as authors trying to compete for readers.
So, what's your approach to keeping suspense alive in a story centered around policy and bureaucracy?
So one of the key things that I try to do is have all the characters face real health challenges, even if it's not the central one to the story, because that's what we all face in our lives at some point, our own illness or someone that we loved or a friend. And so I try to personalize the healthcare experience that's going on. But then what I also try to do is using my ability and my experience and having been involved in so many complicated healthcare matters is to try to create a complex web of these things that again gets the reader to challenge their mind about what's going on and where is this going, but at the end of it brings it all together in an understandable way where people go, oh, I didn't see that coming, and yes, that solves these problems. And so I've been proud of my ability to do that, even starting with the first book.
Certainly, Mr. Greg. So, what would be your advice for those people out there who want to write their own book?
I think the best thing I could say is just do it. The of course you got to do the research and the hard work and try to learn different ways to do it, but just doing it was the key for me. As soon as I started sitting down and putting pen to paper, with actually more fingers to computer, um, the magic started to happen and I started to learn faster. And so do it and just stick with it. It's a hard thing to do. You're really subject to an audience of yourself more than anyone else, and there's a lot of barriers put in your way to try to succeed in doing this. And the best thing you can do is just keep doing it, stay at it, find friends that will encourage you, find services that will help encourage you, but just stick with it and live your dream.
Just do it, people, and stop procrastinating. If you have the passion to write, write, and share to the world. So, what will be your short term and long term goals in writing, Mr. Greg?
I want to write at least 5 books to this current series. And then my hope is that it actually takes with readers to a greater extent than it is now, partly because my dream for my writing underneath it all is that the revenue for my books does not go to me, it goes to a foundation that I've created.
Great.
And the idea is that with the monies coming in, that if we had enough sales, that we would be able to do more of the work that we used to do back 20 years ago when we had money in this foundation to make American healthcare better. So that's the bigger vision that I'm trying to activate, and I'll need a lot more sales and a lot more books to be able to get there. For now, I'm happy just getting my stories out and getting people to read them and enjoy them.
Mr. Greg, we salute you of what you are doing. I hope people will learn and will empower and they will follow what are you talking about in your novel. So let's talk about the impact and message. What do you hope readers take away from the death panels besides enjoying the mystery?
That healthcare in America, especially, is a challenge, and it's something that we're going to have to fight for the right to get it. And I mean that in the sense of trying to find how, in our way of governing ourselves, we find the right methods and the right approaches to make it fair and accessible for people, and more than else, works for them when they need it most.
Certainly. So, how does the fiction help open up conversations about real health policy issues?
How does the conversation help with this?
Yes,
Um, it's real. Again, what I shared earlier. Every one of us, almost every one of us, face some type of healthcare situation in our lifetime. And the more that my stories are brought from real stories that other people have encountered, and allow people to see this not maybe in what they're experienced, but then can find themselves when they do experience it. That's the beginning of deeper awareness about the importance of these issues and the need for us to come together as a society with better answers.
so, do you think, Mr. Greg, that Eve work as a metaphor for a detective work that policymakers must do?
The herb is a metaphor for exactly that. He's the solution, along with his friends. It's a team of people who need to solve these things. Is one of the sub messages I try to bring my books in. So there are other co protagonists who are helping to share the vision of better health that Irv carries with him at a deep level. And it's seeing that there are solutions, and the way to do this is positive and hopeful, and trying to build upon the great miracles of American healthcare, and not sort of get lost in the problems of the system and the greed of the system and the struggle for control that I was talking about earlier. It's our aspiration to be the best of who we are, our better angels, and not those bad angels that too often pop up.
Follow the healthcare of Canada, people. Follow Canada. So, have any readers shared stories with you about how the book changed their view of healthcare?
Oh, so many. I've gotten so many great conversations with people and reviews, or people have said that it's really helped them feel better about their own circumstances and the own challenges that they've faced. And they've really encouraged me to keep writing and get more books out there because they really enjoy the series and what I'm trying to do with the notion of the series.
Certainly. So, how many series do you think you will produce, Mr. Greg?
Right now, the fourth book that I'm working on is a crossover series. So I hope to have the Irv Tinsley series be at least 5 books. But meanwhile, I'm introducing a new character in the fourth book that's going to work with Irv on solving a problem in a rural setting. And I'm going to try to turn that into a different series. That character is the longest serving hospital administrator in the United States. And if it works, I'll be able to use him to go back to explore in America's history some issues around how the system developed that it is, but in a much more practical setting than the way I did in the first book, The Theory of Irv. So that's kind of the idea, is to work on those 2 series and then just see where it goes, and pick it up from there wherever life takes me.
Certainly. We're looking forward for the fourth book, Mr. Greg. And before we wrap up our discussion for Today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Food 101. In a fifth season, people, fifth season, Bishop Alexander, one of the specialty chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. Please do listen to our latest episode. We talk about, or we're reading our letter senders all over the world. So please do listen Food 101 wherever you listen your podcast. So Mr. Greg, what real life policies or debates influence the events in the book?
A lot of it's around our experience with healthcare reform back in the 1990s and into the 2000s. What's called the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, is a central feature in the first book, and still is with us today. So there's a lot of what I have to share about that in the later books, just to set the right context for the fictional tales, but also the policy questions that I'm trying to bring up in my books.
So, Mr. Greg, I'm curious what happened to the Obamacare?
It's still in effect. It wasn't a perfect legislation, but it was still in effect. There was an effort in the first Trump administration to effectively repeal the entire act, but it was defeated. And the question is whether that's going to come back in the second Trump administration, or whether the Affordable Care Act will continue to be kind of the framework for how we do American health care in America, or whether there's a new framework that gets introduced. It's too early to tell. There's a lot of noise going on right now, but exactly where this is going next is really just a guess at this point. But I'll be there watching, and when I know, it'll be time to write my fifth book.
Yes, until 12 series, Mr. Greg, or 20 series until the American people wake up. So, Mr. Greg Vigdor, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world and to empower American people. And I hope they will wake up right now. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your series?
Yes, so the books are available on Amazon, but I also have an author website at gregvigdor.com, where you can actually get a free mini story to get introduced to my series and whether it's for you. gregvigdor.com.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Greg Vigdor, because if you support him, more and more and more series to come. So, Mr. Greg, thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time.
Good to be with you.
More to come, people. See you soon.